In 2005, a reviewer on a European watch forum posted a teardown analysis of a Hublot Big Bang that had just been released with a retail price of approximately $7,000. He had opened the case back, identified the movement inside, and cross-referenced the caliber with its commercial supplier. What he found was a modified ETA 2892, a movement available in watches retailing for under $500, dressed in a proprietary rotor and sold inside a case constructed from materials Hublot described as innovative, but that the reviewer's analysis suggested were standard titanium and rubber at manufacturing costs nowhere near the margin the retail price implied. He published the analysis. The watch community read it. Hublot sold millions of dollars of Big Bang watches that year anyway. The brand barely flinched. And the person who walked into a boutique 6 months later and paid $7,000 for that movement in that case had almost certainly never read the teardown, never looked up what an ETA 2892 cost in any other application, and never asked why the retail price was 14 times the technical justification for it. We are going to name the 5 brands doing exactly that calculation right now, explain precisely what makes each one a bad deal for the person buying it, and then name the 5 brands that actually charge what the watch is worth and deliver something that justifies every dollar of the price. The watch industry has spent decades counting on you to never compare these two lists. We are going to put them side by side today. The first brand robbing you is Hublot, and the argument begins and ends with the movement question that the Big Bang teardown raised in 2005, and that has never been satisfactorily answered in the 2 decades since. Hublot was founded in 1980 by Carlo Crocco with a genuine design innovation, a gold case on a natural rubber strap, a combination that the luxury market had never seen and that the Baselworld crowd initially received with confusion and then with genuine interest. The brand sold on that innovation for years. Then in 2004, Jean-Claude Biver, the most effective brand builder in the modern watch industry, took over as CEO and transformed Hublot from an interesting curiosity into a global luxury brand through a specific combination of celebrity partnerships, sports sponsorships, and material innovation marketing that positioned Hublot as the watch of the future. The Big Bang appeared in 2005. It was large, visible, bold, and expensive. It became the most commercially successful new watch launch of the decade. What happened inside the case, the question of what movement was actually powering the object you were paying $7,000 to $20,000 to own, received considerably less attention than the exterior. Hublot has developed in-house movements for certain references and continues to invest in movement manufacturing, but significant portions of their catalog, particularly at the entry and mid-levels, run on movements sourced from external suppliers at costs that are not disclosed and that bear no relationship to the retail price applied to them once they are inside a Hublot case. The Classic Fusion at $8,000 to $12,000, one of the brand's most commercially important lines, uses movements that the collector community has consistently argued are underqualified for the price. The case materials, the proprietary rubber compounds, the MHUB movement branding applied to sourced calibers, all of it constitutes a premium that you are paying not for what is inside the watch, but for the association with a brand that has spent 20 years telling athletes, footballers, and Formula One paddocks that wearing a Big Bang says something specific about who you are. It does say something specific. It says you did not read the teardown. The second brand robbing you is Tag Heuer, and the argument here is different from Hublot because Tag Heuer is a brand with a genuinely extraordinary history that has spent the last 2 decades systematically trading that history for short-term commercial volume at the expense of everything that made the history worth having. Tag Heuer was founded as Heuer in 1860 in Saint-Imier. In 1969, they produced the Caliber 11, the world's first automatic chronograph movement, developed in collaboration with Breitling, Hamilton, and movement manufacturer Buren. That achievement is real and significant. The Monaco, launched the same year, was the first water-resistant automatic chronograph wristwatch in a square case, and Steve McQueen wore it in Le Mans in 1970 in one of the most consequential celebrity watch appearances in the industry's history. The Carrera, the Autavia, the Link, these are legitimate watch designs with documented histories. What Tag Heuer has done since the LVMH acquisition in 1999, and with increasing aggression since approximately 2010, is expand production volume to approximately 380,000 watches per year, while maintaining retail prices that the production volume does not support. Most Tag Heuer references today use movements sourced from external suppliers, from ETA's successors, or from Sellita, or the brand's own Caliber 1887 and subsequent in-house development, which is legitimate but has been marketed with a consistency of claims that exceeds what the watchmaking community has been willing to confirm independently. The secondary market for Tag Heuer is the most objective measure available. Most references depreciate significantly at retail, trading on the secondary market at 50 to 60% of what the authorized dealer charged. The vintage exceptions, the original Monaco Gulf references, the early Carrera chronographs, hold and appreciate because they represent what the brand actually was when the history being cited in every current marketing campaign was being made. The current production catalog does not hold value because the market has collectively determined that the retail price is not supported by what is inside the watch. The history is real. The current product does not deliver the history. It delivers the association with the history, which is a different and more expensive thing. The third brand robbing you is Breitling in its current positioning, and this requires a careful distinction between what Breitling genuinely achieved historically and what the current retail price structure asks you to pay for in the contemporary catalog. Breitling was founded in 1884 and built a reputation over a century as the professional aviation instrument watch of choice, the timing tool that appeared in aircraft cockpits and on the wrists of pilots who needed reliable chronograph function in high-stress conditions. The Navitimer, introduced in 1952 and still in production, is a legitimate aviation instrument, a circular slide rule bezel that can calculate fuel consumption, rate of climb, airspeed, and distance on a single wrist-worn tool. The Chronomat, the Super Ocean, these are genuine tool watches with documented professional histories. What the current retail price of a Breitling reflects is a combination of the manufacturing cost of the watch itself, which is legitimate, and the cost of a global marketing infrastructure, aviation sponsorships, airline partnerships, an ambassador program, and boutique operations in premium retail locations across the world that the consumer finances entirely through the retail price without receiving any direct benefit from it. A Breitling Navitimer in steel currently retails between $6,000 and $9,000 depending on configuration. On the secondary market, it trades at significant discounts to retail, with Breitling recorded as showing the greatest secondary market value loss among major brands at negative 4.49% in the first quarter of 2024. That is the market telling you with its own pricing that the retail premium does not reflect the actual value of the object being purchased. The watch is competent. The movement in current production Breitling is frequently in-house, a genuine development since the current era began in 2017. The retail price is structured around a brand infrastructure that the person buying the watch is paying for completely and recovering almost none of through resale. The fourth brand robbing you is Invicta, and the argument here is the most straightforward of the five because Invicta operates at a price point that makes the gap between retail and value instantly calculable by anyone who looks at what they are actually purchasing. Invicta sells watches at prices between $50 and $300 with the visual language, the heavy cases, the thick crystals, the elaborate dial layouts of watches costing 10 to 20 times more. They market them aggressively through television shopping channels and promotional pricing that lists a suggested retail of $499. Alongside a sale price of $79, a gap so large it functions as its own admission that the suggested retail was never real. The movements inside Invicta watches are sourced from Japanese Miyota or Swiss Ronda suppliers at commodity prices. The cases are frequently stainless steel over base metal or stainless steel with very limited finishing. The quality control is inconsistent enough that the collector community has documented examples of crown components failing, movement noise audible through the caseback, and water resistance ratings that do not survive actual water exposure at the stated depth. None of this would matter if Invicta were presented honestly as what it is: affordable, accessible, visually interesting watchmaking for people who want the look without the price. The problem is that Invicta markets itself with language that implies competitive quality, with brands charging 5 and 10 times the price, and uses promotional pricing structures designed to create the impression of a deal when the watch at $79 is priced appropriately and the suggested retail of $499 was never what the watch was worth. That gap between the implied value and the actual value is the robbery, not the price itself. The fifth brand robbing you is the category the industry calls fashion watches, with Michael Kors as the defining commercial example, and the argument requires understanding what happens when a clothing and accessories brand licenses its name onto a watch movement case without any connection to watchmaking heritage, manufacturing capability, or technical development. Michael Kors watches retail between $150 and $400, occupy the accessible fashion watch tier, and use movements sourced from suppliers at commodity prices that are fully appropriate for the $150 entry point. The robbery is not at the entry point. The robbery is in the branding premium applied to watches at $300 to $400 that use the same movements and case constructions as watches at $150, but carry a larger logo and occupy a higher shelf position in department stores. You're paying $250 additional dollars for the association with a fashion brand whose core business is handbags and sunglasses, and whose engagement with watchmaking is limited to licensing the name for a category that benefits from the brand's retail presence. The watch does not benefit from watchmaking heritage because there is none. It does not benefit from in-house movement development because none exists. It exists because the retail channel needed something with the Michael Kors name on it in the watch category, and the licensing fee made the arrangement commercially viable. The person buying it at $350 is paying a $200 fashion premium for an object that a brand without a fashion story would sell for $150. That is not illegal. It is not even unusual in the fashion industry. It is a robbery that happens with the consent of the buyer, who is purchasing a logo and receiving a watch as the vehicle for displaying it. Now, here are the 5 brands actually worth the money, and the argument for each of them is the same argument from a different angle. The price reflects what is actually inside the watch, not what the marketing department decided the association was worth. The first brand worth every penny is Seiko, and specifically the Seiko within the $400 to $2,000 range, where the brand's manufacturing capability most visibly exceeds its retail price. Seiko has been making watches in Japan since 1881. They produced the world's first quartz watch, the Astron, in 1969. They developed the spring drive, a hybrid movement that uses a mechanical mainspring regulated by a quartz oscillator to achieve accuracy of 1 second per day, which outperforms COSC certified Swiss mechanical movements at any price. The Seiko 5 sports automatic, retailing at $250 to $400, contains a movement that Seiko designs, manufactures, and assembles in-house. The Grand Seiko Snowflake at $5,000 to $6,000 is finished by hand at the Shizukushi Watch Studio in Iwate Prefecture to a standard of dial and case finishing that horological scholars now compare directly with Geneva Haute Horlogerie. The case reflects textures from the natural landscape surrounding the studio, each one different because the hand finishing process does not produce uniform results, and the brand considers that variation a quality rather than a defect. Swiss brands at 3 times the price cannot match the level of hand finishing in the Grand Seiko dial. Seiko has never needed to tell you this because their prices do not require justification. The watch justifies itself the moment you examine what was done to it. The second brand worth every penny is Oris, the independent Swiss watchmaker based in Holstein that has operated since 1904 without ever being acquired by Swatch Group, Richemont, or LVMH. Oris makes its position explicit. They source movements externally for certain references and say so. They manufacture in-house for others and say so, and they price at multiples of manufacturing costs that the collector community has independently assessed as among the most honest in the Swiss industry. The Aquis Diver at $1,500 is a legitimate 300-meter water-resistant tool watch whose movement and case construction are priced at what they actually cost to produce. The Big Crown Pointer Date at $2,000 contains a genuine date complication displayed by a red pointer hand rather than a date window in a case architecture with a documented history in aviation. The Caliber 400 in-house movement, developed over years and launched in 2020, delivers 5 days of power reserve, is anti-magnetic, and includes a 10-year service interval, which directly reduces the long-term cost of ownership beyond the retail price. A watch that costs $1,500 to buy and $1,200 to service every 5 years costs more over a decade than a watch that costs $2,000 to buy and requires its first service at year 10. Oris has been transparent about this calculation from the beginning. They are not a prestige brand, they are an honest brand. In an industry built on the gap between those two things, that distinction is worth considerably more than the marketing spends of the brands robbing you. The third brand worth every penny is Lange Söhne, and the argument here operates in a completely different price register from Oris and Seiko, but applies the same logic with the same result. The retail price reflects what was actually done to make the watch. Lange Söhne was founded in Glashütte, Germany in 1845, expropriated by the Soviet authorities after World War II, and refounded in 1990 following German reunification by Walter Lange, the great-great-grandson of the founder. The movements produced in Glashütte since 1994 are finished by hand to standards that the German tradition of watchmaking, distinct from and in certain technical respects exceeding the Geneva tradition, has maintained for over a century. The outsize date, Lange's signature complication, requires a subsidiary mechanism of 46 additional parts to display a date legibly enough to read without a magnifier. The double-split chronograph, introduced in 2004, was the first wristwatch in history with a column wheel-controlled double rattrapant mechanism, a complication that took years of engineering development. The Zeitwerk, introduced in 2009, displays jumping numerals in a digital display driven by a mechanical movement of a complexity that the name alone does not communicate. Every one of these watches retails at prices between $20,000 and several $100,000. Every one of them is worth the price because the price reflects the actual cost of making the thing. They are owned by Richemont, which is not ideal from a corporate independence perspective, but they operate with a degree of manufacturing autonomy that the movement quality confirms. You are not paying for marketing when you buy a Lange. You are paying for the work. The fourth brand worth every penny is Nomos Glashütte, and it is the brand that makes the strongest possible case that value and transparency can coexist with design ambition in the contemporary watch market. Nomos was founded in Glashütte, Germany in 1990, the same year as Lange Söhne, in the same town, in the same post-reunification context. They began by sourcing movements and assembling them in-house, which they disclosed publicly and continued to disclose. In 2005, they began developing their own movement architecture, and in 2013, they introduced the swing system, an in-house escapement developed over 8 years that replaced the external components previously used at the regulation level. The swing system features an in-house manufactured lever and escape wheel, making Nomos one of the very small number of watch brands producing every element of the movement regulation in-house. Their watches retail from $1,400 to $20,000 depending on complication. A Nomos Tangent at $1,700 contains an in-house movement with a swing system escapement, a hand-finished Glashütte 3/4 plate, blued steel screws, and a dial legibility that graphic designers consistently cite as the most resolved in the category. They do not advertise with Formula One sponsorships. They do not have celebrity ambassadors. They manufacture the watch and explain what they made and charge what it cost to make it. That is the entire business model, executed without deviation for 35 years. The fifth brand worth every penny is Patek Philippe. And the argument for why a watch costing $20,000 to $500,000 represents genuine value requires understanding what Patek is doing that no other brand in the world does at the same level. Patek Philippe has been manufacturing in Geneva continuously since 1839. They have never been publicly listed, never been acquired by an outside group, and remain family-owned by the Stern family, who purchased the brand in 1932. Their guarantee to service every watch they have ever produced back to 1839 is backed by a physical parts archive and a skilled workforce trained in calibers that have not been in production for decades. Their movements are developed entirely in-house, tested to standards that exceed COSC certification, and finished by hand by watchmakers who have spent careers on individual caliber families. The Caliber 240, the ultra-thin automatic powering the Calatrava, was introduced in 1977 and has been continuously refined without being abandoned, a product decision that requires maintaining tooling, training, and expertise across nearly 5 decades for a single movement. The Caliber 89, the most complicated portable timepiece ever made at its introduction in 1989, contains 1,728 parts and 33 complications, including a star chart, a tourbillon, and a secular perpetual calendar accurate for 1,000 years. 4 examples were produced. The retail price reflected what it actually cost to build something that complicated. Every Patek Philippe on the current production list follows the same logic at a smaller scale. The price is the cost of the craft, disclosed honestly, applied without apology. You're not paying for a sponsorship. You're paying for a watch built by people who have been building watches in the same city for nearly 2 centuries, and who guarantee that they will be building watches to service it for the next 2 centuries as well. Here is what separates every brand on the first list from every brand on the second. The brands robbing you are charging for the association with watchmaking. The brands worth the money are charging for the watchmaking. That distinction sounds simple. In practice, it requires knowing what a movement costs, what finishing quality actually looks like, what in-house development means, and what it costs to do, and what the secondary market is saying about the gap between retail price and market value when the association premium has been stripped away. That information is available. It is available on Chrono24, on every collector forum, in every movement teardown published by the watch community since the internet made them possible. The brands robbing you are counting on you to never access that information before walking into their boutique. The brands worth the money are counting on you to access it, because when you do, the price they charge becomes the most obvious conclusion in the room.